The restaurant shimmered like something out of a magazine, crystal chandeliers spilling gold light over tables draped in starched linen. I stood in the entryway, clutching my small handbag, feeling the weight of every wrinkle in my old navy dress. It was the one my late husband, Arthur, used to love. Tonight, I hoped it might help me blend into Damien's glittering world. My son rose to greet me, his smile polite but fleeting, as though I were one more obligation he had to check off the list. Elise sat beside him, her hair in a sleek chignon, dripping with jewelry that likely cost more than a year's rent for my apartment. She waved her manicured hand toward me. "Marcella, you look presentable," she said, letting the word hang in the air like a bone tossed to a stray dog. I forced a smile and slid into the seat across from them. The waiter appeared, and without so much as a glance at the menu, Elise declared, "We'll have the Chateau Margaux, the 2004 vintage." She looked at me with mock concern. "Unless you'd prefer something more affordable." My cheeks warmed, but I kept my voice steady. "The wine sounds fine." Dinner unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Damien spoke of his promotion at the firm. Elise detailed their upcoming trip to Santorini. I nodded at the right moments, though each word made me feel smaller, like I had somehow wandered onto the wrong stage. Then, just as dessert menus were set before us, Damien slipped a glossy pamphlet across the table. "Mom," he began, his tone rehearsed, "Elise and I have been thinking about your living situation. This place," he tapped the cover, "a smiling elderly couple frozen in stock photo bliss, is one of the best assisted living communities in the area. Affordable, too." I stared at the brochure, my throat tightening. Elise leaned closer, her smile sharp as glass. "Let's be honest. Marcella, you'll die poor and alone anyway. Isn't it better to have dignity in your final years?" Her words sliced clean through me. I looked to Damien, searching for the boy who once clung to my hand at school drop-offs, the son who swore he'd always take care of me. He only stared at his plate, his silence deafening. I excused myself quietly and walked out into the cool Boston night, my steps unsteady but purposeful. In the solitude of my car, I gripped the steering wheel and whispered, "They think I'm powerless. Let's see." I sat in my small apartment long after the restaurant lights had dimmed, the echoes of Elise's laugh still vibrating in my ears. The night pressed against the windows like a reminder of every lonely decision I'd ever made. I thought about Arthur, gone too soon at 40, leaving me with a boy barely 12 and a lifetime of responsibility. Raising Damien alone had been a relentless rhythm of work and worry. I taught history during the day, then tutored local students at night. There were weeks I skipped meals so he could have a proper lunch, so he could participate in extracurricular activities that might secure scholarships. I remember the winter he needed a new winter coat. My paycheck barely stretched, but I refused to let him wear threadbare jackets. I had saved him from ruin more than once. There was a hidden college debt I quietly paid off during his final semester, shielding him from the consequences of a reckless loan, and not once did he thank me. I told myself it didn't matter that love wasn't transactional. I told myself he would understand one day. But tonight, that belief crumbled like old plaster from a wall. Damien's eyes, cold and distant, followed Elise's every word. He valued their status, their vacations, their perfection. Over the years I had poured into him. Over the nights I stayed awake worrying if he was safe or fed. I rose and walked toward a corner where boxes of Arthur's old records sat, untouched since his funeral. I opened one and sifted through decades of papers, tax returns, letters, receipts, investments. Among them was a thick manila folder labeled Juniper. My fingers lingered over the tab, remembering Arthur's quiet instructions. Keep it safe. Marcella, one day. It might help you more than me. The folder felt heavier than any mortgage or student loan I had ever carried. It was a testament to prudence, foresight, and survival. Tonight, it seemed to pulse with promise. The first tangible reminder that power could exist quietly, that years of sacrifice didn't have to be meaningless. I closed the box gently, the weight of the night pressing on me, but not crushing me. A plan was beginning to take shape, and with it, the first flicker of control I had felt in decades. I sank back into my chair, eyes fixed on the folder, and knew the next step would change everything. Morning light spilled across the worn carpet, highlighting the dust motes that danced in lazy arcs. I pulled the manila folder labeled Juniper from its hiding place and let the papers fall onto the kitchen table. Inside were stock certificates, bonds, property deeds, all meticulously organized. My breath caught as I traced the neat handwriting on Apple shares purchased in the 1980s, long before the company became a household name. There were properties in towns no one had heard of, bought cheaply and held patiently. Arthur had been a quiet genius with money, leaving me a fortune I hadn't even realized I possessed. I picked up my phone and dialed Clara Boone. The familiar click of her answering tone was comforting. "Clara, it's Marcella," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Marcella," she replied warmly. "How are you this morning?" "I need a full review of the Juniper folder," I said, spreading the papers across the table. Minutes later, Clara confirmed what I suspected. My current net worth exceeded $2.3 million, all liquid and accessible. She reminded me gently, "Marcella, you've been living modestly by choice, renting, keeping a low profile. You've tested Damien and Elise, and now you can act strategically." I let her words settle in. Renting had been deliberate. Living simply had been a silent experiment. If they thought I was powerless, I would let them remain in that illusion a little longer. If they think I'm poor, let them, I whispered to myself. I'll choose the moment to prove them wrong. Clara's advice was pragmatic. Don't tell them anything. Buy the property in cash. If necessary, place it in a trust, legally airtight. Protect yourself while you plan your next move. I folded the papers, feeling a quiet surge of control for the first time in years. The years of sacrifice, of silence, of playing the part of the modest widow they had led me here. And now, I had the tools to turn what they believed was my weakness into an undeniable strength. I poured a cup of coffee and stared at the folder, already imagining the villa that could be mine, and the life that would finally be on my own terms. Tomorrow, I would start looking for the perfect place. The morning was crisp as Linda Harris steered the car along winding New England roads. Each property we passed seemed either too small or too modest, none matching the quiet grandeur I had imagined. I barely spoke, letting my mind wander to Arthur, to the life we had built together, and to the quiet confidence that came from knowing I now held the means to claim my own future. The third property appeared like a vision, a colonial-style villa nestled along Willow Creek. Oak trees lined the driveway, their branches arching like welcoming arms. The front facade, with its French doors and ivy climbing the stone walls, promised both history and elegance. A vast rose garden stretched along the back, blossoms just beginning to peek through early spring buds. Stepping into the villa, I felt a strange sense of familiarity. In the library, floor-to-ceiling shelves rose like silent sentinels. I imagined Arthur sitting in the leather armchair we had once shared, his hands folded over the spines of books he loved. The weight of memory pressed gently against me, and for the first time in years, I felt at home before even claiming it. Linda was talking about market value, negotiation points, minor repairs, but I barely heard her. I made a decision and stated it plainly. I'll pay the full asking price in cash. Her mouth dropped slightly. Full price, in cash. We can close in 2 weeks. Make it 1, I said, letting the finality of my words settle in the room. By the end of the day, I had arranged movers, a locksmith to change all locks, and a gardener to tend the roses. My old rental remained untouched, a temporary refuge, while I prepared for the life that had been quietly waiting for me all along. That night, in the quiet of my new space, I pulled my journal close and wrote slowly, deliberately, I will not die poor. I will not die alone. I will die respected. The ink dried beneath my fingers, sealing a promise I had made to myself long ago. Tomorrow, I would welcome Damien and Elise and watch as they confronted a reality they never expected. A reality I had quietly built from the ground up. I greeted Damien and Elise at the front door with a polite smile, concealing the satisfaction that had been simmering inside me for weeks. Coffee, I offered, gesturing toward the living room where sunlight pooled over the polished floors. They exchanged glances, their eyes widening at the sheer scale of the villa. Elise stepped inside first, her heels clicking against the hardwood. This house is enormous. Too big for just one person, she said, her voice dripping with both surprise and judgment. She swept her hand across the living room as though claiming it by gesture alone. Damien followed, pretending to admire the architecture. The kids could have rooms upstairs. Mom, he said, leaning casually against the banister. You'd never be lonely with us around. I nodded, letting their words hang in the air. Elise smiled, a little too broadly, and added, almost gleefully, I've already spoken to a decorator about nursery ideas. I thought we could start planning right away. My lips pressed into a thin line as I poured tea into delicate cups, setting them on the table with steady hands. My face remained unreadable. My thoughts focused on the folder tucked in my study desk and the trust documents waiting quietly in Clara Boone's capable hands. They continued speaking, unaware of the invisible walls I had begun to raise, their voices weaving excitement and entitlement around me. I listened, nodding at intervals, pretending to consider their suggestions while my mind catalogued each assumption they made. Each claim they imagined was theirs. Finally, I placed the tea tray down and excused myself. I just need to make one call, I said, my voice calm, measured. My hands were steady as I walked to the study, knowing that the conversation out there could wait. The weight of anticipation and power pressed lightly against my shoulders, a sensation I hadn't felt in decades. The faint murmur of their discussion followed me down the hall. Elise already planning layouts and Damien weighing furniture placement, unaware that every step they took was on property I had fully claimed, and that the true authority rested quietly just beyond their reach. I settled into my chair, the folder before me, and prepared to turn their assumptions into the reality they never expected. I closed the study door behind me and sank into the leather chair, the folder of documents spread across the desk before me. My fingers traced the embossed edges, steady and deliberate, as I picked up the phone and dialed Clara Boone. Marcella, Clara's voice answered, calm and steady. What's happening? I need to finalize everything we discussed, I said. The villa. The trust, make it airtight. She listened while I outlined my plan. Together, we established the Juniper Rose Trust, irrevocable and binding. I would remain the sole lifetime beneficiary of the property, and any attempt by Damien or Elise to challenge it would trigger a no-contest clause, stripping them of all rights, even to enter the property. The remainder of the estate would go to the Harbor and Hearth Foundation, ensuring the villa served seniors abandoned or neglected by their families. Clara typed furiously, the click of her keyboard punctuating each clause, each legal safeguard. This will protect you completely. Marcella, she said, no loopholes, no back doors. You control it entirely. I nodded, feeling a sense of calm power I hadn't felt in decades. But there was one final precaution. I placed a call to the locksmith, arranging for all locks to be changed and security codes updated. The gates were reprogrammed, and the villa's access was now under my control alone. By the time I returned to the living room, Elise and Damien were discussing furniture placement, completely unaware of the legal fortress I had just established. They glanced at me and interpreted my faint smile as acquiescence, mistaking my composure for agreement. I carried their assumptions like a shield. Let them believe they had influence. Let them plan and claim with words alone, while the law and strategy ensured they had none. The quiet satisfaction of unseen power coursed through me as I poured a fresh cup of tea, the steam rising like a promise. No one would see the real authority until it was too late, and when the time came, the consequences would be undeniable, permanent, and entirely under my control. The next morning, I would confront them again not with words, but with the reality I had silently built. The moment Damien stormed into the villa, his face tight with anger, I knew the quiet of the morning was over. Elise followed, heels clicking against the polished floor, her expression a mixture of outrage and disbelief. You tricked us, Elise hissed, pointing a manicured finger at me. You can't cut out your only son. Damien's voice rose, brittle with frustration. This house is supposed to be ours. It's family legacy. I set the folder of documents on the table and opened it, letting the papers fall neatly into place. My gaze met theirs, calm and unwavering. This is mine, not yours, not ever. Elise's composure fractured. She shouted about unpaid bills, looming credit card debt, and hidden loans, admitting that they had counted on this property to bail them out. Damien's shoulders sagged slightly, but he tried to argue for what he thought was his right. At least think of your grandchildren-to-be, he said, his voice pleading. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the warmth steadying me. I will, I said quietly. That's why I won't let them learn greed from you. The room felt smaller, as though the walls themselves had tightened, enclosing them in the truth they had refused to see. Their assumptions of entitlement meant nothing against the reality I had prepared. Every document, every legal safeguard, every silent call I had made the day before converged into an invisible fortress. Damien looked at the papers, his hands trembling, realizing the villa was beyond his reach. Elise spun in frustration, cursing their lack of foresight, while I remained seated, the calm eye of the storm. Their anger, their despair, their arguments bounced off walls that were no longer just brick and plaster. They bounced off my resolve, solid and immovable. By the end of the confrontation, it was clear who held the power, and I could feel the weight of it settle comfortably around me as I prepared for the days ahead. In the weeks that followed, Damien began to appear at the villa with less desperation and more purpose. He showed up carrying tools, fixing a squeaky hinge on the back door one afternoon, trimming the hedges another. He even pushed the mower across the wide lawn without being asked, sweat streaking his shirt. The arrogance that once clung to him now absent. I let him come, but I made the rules clear. You're welcome to help, I told him, but there will be no talk of money, no expectations, no entitlement. This house is not your inheritance, it's mine. He nodded each time, quieter than before, and returned with small acts of service instead of demands. Joy, my neighbor from across the lane, stopped by one morning as Damien carried bags of groceries into the kitchen. She raised her eyebrows and whispered to me later, "He looks different. Maybe he's learning." I only gave her a cautious smile. I had learned not to mistake effort for change too quickly. Still, the rhythm of his visits grew steady. One Saturday, I handed Damien a tray of rose cuttings I had been saving. "Plant them along the back fence," I said. He knelt in the soil, his hands clumsy at first, then gentler as he worked. He glanced up at me, almost shyly. "Remember when we planted roses at the old house? I must have been 7. Dad was still alive." The memory softened something in me, though I kept my face composed. We worked side by side in the garden, the silence carrying more peace than our words could manage. Watching him press the soil around the young roses, I felt a flicker of the boy I once knew. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was a guarded glimmer of hope, fragile as the tender stems in the ground. And as I stood among the roses, I knew the true test of our bond was only just beginning. It took months of steady preparation, but eventually every paper was signed, every clause finalized. The villa now rested inside the Juniper Rose Trust, ironclad and untouchable, its future secured. Clara slid the final document across her desk toward me, her eyes warm with approval. "No one can undo this, Marcella. It will stand exactly as you intend." I nodded, the weight of years lifting as certainty took its place. The will made clear what words had already decided when I no longer walked these halls. The villa would pass to the Harbor and Hearth Foundation, its gardens, its rooms, its library. All of it would become a refuge for seniors abandoned or forgotten by their families. The very thought steadied me. The house would live beyond me, carrying forward a kind of justice. Already, the rooms were finding new life. On weekends, the upstairs suites filled with visiting seniors, staying for short respites organized through the foundation. Laughter carried down the staircases where silence once lingered. The library, once empty, now hummed with voices reading aloud. Pages turning, ideas shared over tea. The walls seemed to breathe again, not with entitlement, but with genuine connection. Damien came by now and then. He never asked about money, never hinted at claims. Instead, he brought groceries, or carried Joy's parcels from across the lane, or fixed a loose shutter without being told. He moved quietly, less sure of himself but more present, as though slowly relearning what it meant to belong without demanding. I spent my mornings on the balcony overlooking Willow Creek, the roses blooming in disciplined rows beneath me. The water shimmered, reflecting a peace I had thought unreachable not so long ago. With shears in hand, I trimmed the branches, the scent of blossoms heavy in the air. I leaned against the railing, watching Damien return from the garden with soil on his hands, and whispered to the roses, "Love may open doors, but only respect keeps them open." The words lingered in the still air, a final promise to myself, a vow sealed not in anger, but in quiet strength. And I knew then that the life I had chosen and protected was truly mine.